Ethan was divorced, and his ex-wife, Chloe, turned around and took the hand of her first love, Mason. The next time they met, Ethan was gigging at a bar, and she had a different man in her arms. He had returned to his old life, while she, it seemed, could never go back to hers. The day Chloe and Ethan got divorced, City Hall was packed. The couple at the next counter was having a terrible fight, but they ended up not going through with it. Chloe and Ethan sat together in silence, calmly signing the papers. They walked out the door side by side, divorce certificates in hand. She handed him the car keys and said, "The car's yours." The Vanderbilt family was incredibly wealthy. They weren't short one luxury car. Besides, she had already transferred the title of the mansion they lived in to Ethan's name. But they had arrived in the same car, and Ethan figured a Vanderbilt wasn't accustomed to taking taxis. Out of courtesy, he asked, "Should I give you a ride?" Before he could finish, a car horn blared beside them, and the window of a red Porsche rolled down to reveal a handsome, gentle face. Every strand of his windswept hair was perfectly in place. "Chloe, get in." The man was Mason, Chloe's childhood sweetheart who had just returned from overseas. Everyone in their social circle said Mason was Chloe's first love. Seeing how perfectly they fit together, it all made sense. No wonder Chloe had been so generous. She just wanted Ethan out of the picture quickly. Ethan managed a polite smile. "Since you have a ride, I'll be on my way." Chloe looked at him calmly, her hands open at her sides, and after a long moment, she said, "Drive safe." Ethan nodded, speaking with genuine sincerity. "All the best." "Goodbye, Chloe." 2 months passed by. Then, Ethan had sold the house she gave him and bought a small 2-bedroom apartment in a great neighborhood. It was much smaller, but at least it didn't feel so cavernous living alone. The new place had a terrace that got wonderful light, and he often spent whole afternoons out there painting. At night, he went back to his old gig, singing at a local bar, observing the nightlife to find inspiration for his art. Tonight, he was filling in for a friend and was surprised to see Chloe there. He was on stage, and she was in the audience. When their eyes met, hers were perfectly calm. Only the man she was leaning against wasn't Mason. Had she already dumped her first love? That seemed awfully quick. After 2 more songs, Ethan stepped off stage to use the restroom and found Chloe leaning against the doorway smoking. They hadn't seen each other in 2 months, and for a moment, he couldn't think of an appropriately awkward greeting. She spoke first, her voice a little hoarse through the veil of smoke. "How have you been?" "I'm doing well." Then she asked, "Running out of money?" He knew she was asking why he was singing in a bar again since she'd given him the house, the car, and a sum of money large enough for a normal person to live on for the rest of their life. He didn't answer directly, just quipped, "Can you ever have too much?" Chloe crushed out her cigarette, a cool smirk on her lips. "I forgot," she said, her tone biting. "You love money." He had married Chloe for money after all. A year ago, she'd had a major fallout with her family, and to rebel against an arranged marriage, she had proposed to him, a complete stranger. It had been a night just like this, in this very same bar, where she'd said, "You're a decent singer and you're easy on the eyes. Want to marry me to get my family off my back?" In return, she would pay him a substantial sum. He desperately needed the money at the time, and he couldn't deny she was beautiful, so he agreed on the spot. He remembered she was stunned for a second, then a knowing smile spread across her face. "You've got guts." He smiled back. "I've got nothing to lose." He only found out later that earning this money wasn't so simple. He could never fit into her world, where the trust fund kids all looked down on his ordinary background. At one party, while Chloe was in the restroom, one of her drunk friends started mocking him, saying the only reason he was her fiancé was because her first love was still out of the country. He was arrogant back then, so he just raised his glass to the friend. "A psychic once told me I was destined for great wealth," he said. "And based on what you're saying, it sounds like she was right." It left her speechless, but he never went to any of Chloe's parties again. It wasn't just her friends. The Vanderbilts never saw him as anything more than a placeholder. Her mother had apparently favored a socially prominent musician for her, not some low-life artist who couldn't even make a decent living. On the drive back from the Vanderbilt estate that day, Chloe took his hand for the first time, tilting her head with a roguish grin to comfort him. "Don't mind my mother." He glanced down at their intertwined hands and teased her. "Didn't you tell them I'm a musician too?" Her eyes danced with amusement as she nodded seriously. "My mistake." Next time I introduce you, I'll be sure to add that title. Except to my mother. I'm afraid she might have a stroke. Looking back, there were definitely hard times in that marriage, but it never felt unbearable because Chloe always made sure he was well compensated. They were just two people using each other. After that, he ran into Chloe a few more times at the bar where he had his regular gig. As always, he was on stage and she was in the audience. Her table was always bustling with people, yet his eyes would always find her, a still point in the chaos. Chloe never played dice or cards. She would just occasionally tilt her head with a faint smile or raise her glass for a toast. The only thing was, she had a different man in her arms every night, and without fail, none of them were as handsome or had the same vibrant energy as Mason. So, where was Mason? Wasn't she afraid he would find out about her behavior? The thought distracted him. He messed up a lyric and the guitarist beside him shot him a look before seamlessly transitioning to the chorus. When he glanced back at the audience, his gaze locked with a pair of dark, intense eyes. Chloe lazily dropped her gaze, finished her drink, and walked out with the handsome man's arm around her. He pulled his eyes away and continued singing his sad love song. They were 2 points moving in opposite directions, destined to travel along straight, endless lines that would never cross again. Love, a force of unknown depths, turning night into day and day into night. He guessed he got too used to the easy life. Going from luxury back to basics was tough. After a few months of being back on his own, his body started to give out. He was leaving the outpatient pharmacy at City General Hospital when he ran into an old acquaintance, one of Chloe's best friends, who was wearing a doctor's white coat. Dr. Shauna Kelly. She raised an eyebrow with a smile. You've known me this long, and you didn't know I was a doctor? She said it as if they were close. In reality, he only remembered her name because she was so beautiful. He gave a noncommittal nod, intending to leave, but she stopped him. Are you sick? Just a small cold. Shauna glanced at the gastroenterology sign behind him and just smiled. When he got home, there was a familiar pair of men's leather shoes in the foyer. He could hear activity in the kitchen. From the doorway, his dad, wearing an apron, opened the kitchen door, and his eyes immediately fell on the pharmacy bag from City General in his hand, lingering there for a moment. He turned to open the fridge, his voice dripping with its usual sarcasm. Well, would you look at that? A rich man's refrigerator is completely empty. He leaned against the wall and retorted, that's because rich people only eat fresh food. They don't keep leftovers. Frankly, I'd be grateful if you had any leftovers to eat at all. He had never approved of Ethan's ridiculous marriage to Chloe, and ever since they got married, he'd spoken to him with this constant sarcastic edge. Ethan knew he was a man of integrity who had taught him his whole life to be grounded, and he couldn't stand that he'd raised a son who was materialistic and vain. He was angry Ethan had made a joke of marriage, angry he'd sold himself for money, angry he'd let her family treat him with contempt without an ounce of shame. But ever since the divorce, he started taking the hour-long bus ride over to cook for him, always leaving his freezer stuffed with dumplings. Looking at his back, which didn't seem so tall anymore, he fought back tears and teased him. Stop scolding me, Dad. I'm already getting my karma, aren't I? Sure enough, he raised his finger as if to curse him out, but instead, the old man took a couple of deep breaths and just yelled, Go wash your hands and eat. I know, Dad. His body couldn't handle it anymore, so he quit the gig at the bar. Luckily, his recent paintings had all sold, so the income was decent. The art school friend who helps him sell his work called. Your piece, Reset, has been sold. Staring at the blank canvas in front of him, he asked, Was it that Ms. Bloom again? Yes, she loves your work. Lately, all of my paintings had been bought by a mysterious woman who called herself Ms. Bloom. She didn't seem to have a preferred style. She was just decisive and generous, buying every single piece he produced. I see. Thanks for your hard work. His friend hesitated on the other end of the line. Ethan, do you happen to know her? He blinked and smiled. Nope. He saw Chloe again at the mall. She and Mason were in a jewelry store picking out diamond rings. He stood outside, watching their happy, intimate moment through the window. Mason was sitting on a high stool, trying on a ring. Chloe stood beside him, smiling and offering her thoughts. Whenever he looked up for her opinion, his face was full of the pure joy and anticipation of a man about to get married. It was a world away from how he had been a year ago. Back then, Chloe and he barely knew each other. And sitting in that couture jewelry boutique, he was too intimidated to even count the zeros on the price tags. It was Chloe who sat lazily beside him, pointing out a few designs for him to try. The sales associate was all smiles, saying enthusiastically, "Mr. Anderson, please take a look at the styles. The diamond and band can be fully customized." He was so dazzled by the tray of diamonds, he couldn't look away, let alone choose one. Seeing his hesitation, Chloe simply picked one out, took his left hand, and slipped it onto his ring finger. Not bad." He glanced at the price and kept his mouth shut. She took it off, slid on another, and studied it. "This one's nice, too." He looked at the tag. Wow, even more expensive. After he had tried on the whole tray, Chloe rested her chin on her hand and asked, "Which one do you like?" Overwhelmed with options, he was about to say they were all fine. Then, he heard her add casually, "Or we could just take all of them." "This one," he said, flustered. He awkwardly selected a simple but unique, less-known design from the tray. The sales associate beside them said, "Excellent choice, sir. The design is called Solely, and it represents you are solely my love." "Solely my love," Chloe repeated softly, a smile spreading across her lips. "Let's get this one. It's perfect." Her gaze was so intense that in that moment, all the glittering jewels in the store seemed to dim, and she was the only thing that shined. And now, standing next to Mason, her expression was gentle, radiating a soft warmth. Who had she been thinking of, he wondered, when she sat next to him that day? "Ethan." Nora came towards him from the mall entrance, handing him a paper bag with a grin. "Brought you a little something from my trip, so you can't say I'm cheap anymore." She was in town on business for a few days, so they'd planned to grab dinner. He teased her. "Is it the expensive kind?" Nora playfully tapped his head and slung her arm over his shoulder, steering him toward the escalator. Of course, my dear friend. I wouldn't dream of shortchanging you." They had only taken a few steps before they came face to face with Chloe and Mason walking out of the shop. Chloe's intense gaze locked onto Nora's hand on his shoulder, then traveled up her arm to her face, her beautiful eyes narrowing in an unreadable, assessing stare. He froze, completely unprepared for this encounter. It was Mason who broke the silence. "Long time no see, Ethan." He snapped out of it, gave him a nod, and pulled Nora along, steering her around them to leave. They were already on the escalator before Nora finally processed it. "Wait, wasn't that your ex-wife?" When he married Chloe, Nora had been working on a project overseas and couldn't come back for it. He'd only ever sent her a wedding photo, so he was surprised she even recognized Chloe. "Yeah, that was her. She's never even met me, her supposed cousin-in-law, and then you got divorced. No wonder she was giving me such an icy stare. She probably thought I was your new girlfriend, right? Jealous." He thought of Mason standing beside her and shook his head with a smile. "No, she's with the man she loves." 3 months later, Chloe's tech company went bankrupt after a failed investment. He was sitting on a bench in the hospital corridor, waiting for his name to be called, when he saw the news about her on his phone. Even though it was in the business section, the reporters used her stunning looks as clickbait, splashing a flawless headshot across the top of the article. In the photo, Chloe wore a black dress, her chin held high in that characteristically defiant way, her eyes half-lidded, masking her cool indifference. He couldn't help but chuckle. She always had to look so cool. Ethan Anderson. He looked up sharply to see Dr. Shauna Kelly standing in front of him in her white coat. She glanced at the name on the waiting room monitor, her voice a low rasp. "Another cold." He tightened his grip on the lab report in his hand and replied flatly, "Stomach's been acting up. Just here for a prescription." "Is that right?" It was late by the time he got home from the hospital. He'd taken the subway in the wrong direction. He didn't realize his mistake until the end of the line, so it was past 9 by the time he finally made it home, only to see the familiar Bentley parked outside his building. He knew all of Chloe's cars, and this one, with its vanity plate, was impossible to miss. As he walked past, he wasn't surprised to lock eyes with Chloe, who was smoking by the open window. "What are you doing here?" She got out, dropped her cigarette to the pavement, and crushed it with her shoe. Then she leaned against the car without saying a word. His heart hammered in his chest, thinking Shauna must have told her something. But when she finally spoke, she just said, "Why are you home so late?" He breathed a sigh of relief, but didn't answer. Then she asked, "Were you on a date with that woman from the mall?" "Who, Nora?" Chloe's lips tightened as she looked up at him. Did you see the news? I'm bankrupt. He wondered if she was here to borrow money or if she just wanted some comfort. Then, looking down, she muttered, "You should find someone rich. That woman you were with obviously isn't willing to spend money on you." He scowled and snapped, "What is wrong with you?" After he collapsed at home, he nearly gave his dad a heart attack when he came to drop off food. He sat on the hospital bed in his gown, watching him busy himself unpacking a thermal container. "I made some soup. It's bland, but try to have some. Is the head of the bed high enough? Do you want me to adjust it? Tell me what you're craving, and I'll ask the doctor if it's okay for you to have it." It had been so long since he'd spoken to him with such gentle calm. He sat down on the stool beside his bed and was quiet for a moment before his voice broke. "This is what your mother died from. I never thought you." His mother died of late-stage stomach cancer, and so did her father. It's hereditary, and now he had it, which meant he probably didn't have long either. But he forced a smile to comfort him. "Medicine is so advanced now. As long as I follow the treatment, the doctors say I can live a normal life. Who knows? I might even outlive you. Besides, did you already know when you married Chloe? Was it because of this?" "Yes, I needed a lot of money for the treatments, more than I could ever make from painting and singing. Then Chloe found me. She was my benefactor, my last hope. But I didn't marry her just for the money." Chloe probably doesn't remember that the first time we met was indeed in a bar, but it wasn't the time she thinks it was. It was much earlier. Back then, a drunk woman was harassing me after my set. She was tall and built, and when I refused to give her my number, she grabbed my arm roughly. "Aren't you for sale? Stop playing hard to get. You should be flattered I'm interested." I was shaking with rage, trying to push her away. "Let go of me, or I'm calling the cops." She just smirked and started dragging me toward an empty booth. "Looks like someone needs to be taught a lesson." Just then, the sharp flick of a lighter cut through the air. In a dark corner, a flame flared to life. Chloe was leaning against the wall, toying with a lighter, her eyes sharp and playful. "Hey, you can't force it." The man said no. "It's none of your business, so beat it." She stood up straight, lifting her chin with a look of cool disdain. "I'm making this my business." Chloe beat the woman up that night, pulled me out of the bar, and called a cab for me. "Go on, get home safe." I leaned out the taxi window, looking at her worriedly. "Is she going to be okay? If you need a witness, I can stay." Chloe lit a cigarette, a casual laugh escaping with the smoke. "Don't worry, I left her alive." The whole damsel in distress thing was a cliché, but I couldn't help the way my heart raced that night. From then on, whenever she was in the audience, my eyes would always find her, but she seemed to have forgotten all about the boy she'd casually rescued. The next time our eyes met, her gaze was that of a complete stranger, and yet she was the one who said to me, "You're a decent singer and you're easy on the eyes. Want to marry me to get my family off my back?" By then, I already knew who she was. The daughter of a real estate mogul, a brilliant young entrepreneur, one of the city's most eligible and wealthy bachelors. We were from two different worlds, but suddenly our paths had crossed. The woman I could never truly have became my unspoken secret. Chloe was in the headlines again, this time for an engagement, but her fiancé wasn't her first love. According to the news, he was the heir to a fortune, a perfect match for her in terms of social standing. The very next day, he ran into Mason at the hospital. He was walking out of the maternity ward, arm in arm with a sweet-looking woman, his face beaming with happiness. "Ethan," he nodded and started to walk past, but he caught up to him. "Ethan, do you have a minute to talk?" On a bench outside the hospital, Mason told him with a warm smile, "I'm going to be a father. The wedding is next month." Ethan nodded and said with genuine congratulations, "That's wonderful." He tilted his head, studying him. "You don't seem surprised. Aren't you going to ask if Chloe's the one who's pregnant?" "We're divorced, Mason." He suddenly laughed. "All right, I'm just kidding. It's not Chloe who's pregnant. In fact, I came back to the States to get married, but my fiancée was never her." He sat there on the bench as a dry leaf spiraled down and landed on his lap. He had been gone for a while, but his words still echoed in his head. The person Chloe loved wasn't Mason, and the rumor about him being her first love was just another shield she had used, just like Ethan, to fend off her family. The doctors told him his condition was deteriorating and that he needed to be admitted for observation, so his dad brought his easel and supplies to his hospital room. But the light here wasn't as warm as the light on his little terrace at home. This place was filled with the sounds of crying and sighing, with partings and death, with shades of gray and white. It was impossible to feel inspired to paint, so his canvas remained blank. He just kept a sketchbook on his lap, doodling aimlessly. "What are you drawing?" Shauna started visiting him from time to time after she found out he'd been admitted. They weren't close, but she didn't seem like a bad person. His pen kept moving as he answered offhandedly, "Miss Rabbit." Shauna leaned over his bed to look and chuckled. "That arrogant expression is pure Chloe." His pen paused for a beat before he continued sketching the outline of a top hat. "You think so?" The air in the room grew still, and for a long time, the only sound was the scratching of his pencil on the paper. "You knew Chloe's company was in trouble for a while, didn't you?" "Yes." "And you knew that's why she divorced you?" "Yes." "And Mason, I knew about that too." Shauna was silent for a moment before speaking again. "Then why did you agree to it? It's so obvious you love her." He looked up at her and held out the back of his hand, showing her the bruised track marks from the IVs, managing a pale, weak smile. "Because, you see, I'm sick. My mom died of stomach cancer, and so did her father. So when I got the diagnosis, I felt a strange sense of destiny, as if something I'd always been expecting had finally arrived. I didn't spend much time grieving. In fact, right after I found out, I put everything on hold and planned a trip. I went to Telluride to see the Alpine Lakes dancing under a gorgeous sunset. I went to Denali to see the snow-capped peaks, screaming my defiance into the wind. I went to the grasslands of Montana where the endless plains met the sky. I traveled to so many places, trying to measure the world's beauty with my own 2 feet, trying to live what little time I had left with no regrets. But after my trip was over, fate threw Chloe into my path. A woman that stunning was bound to inspire a deep, lingering obsession. I fell in love with her gentle, expressive eyes, and I drowned myself in the simple happiness of a life with her, sharing mundane days and passionate nights. We loved each other like any ordinary couple. But fate, it seems, is rarely fair. Chloe's company ran into serious financial trouble. She hid it well, but I saw the light on in her study night after night. Then she grew distant, staying out all night. The gossip was that she'd grown tired of me, so when she asked for a divorce, I agreed without hesitation. It was clearly the answer she wanted, but for a split second, I saw a flicker of something in her beautiful eyes. She said, "Don't worry, you'll get everything you're owed." So she gave me the house, the car, and the money, but none of it could save my life. I took it all without protest, playing the part of the money-grubbing man she believed me to be, and then I slowly faded out of her life. But in the short time I thought I had left, I finally had a regret. After the chemo started, his hair began to fall out in clumps. The dark strands on the white hospital sheets every morning felt like invitations from death itself. He would quietly gather the fallen hairs and throw them away, and he stopped looking in mirrors altogether. Life in the hospital was tough. Beyond the pain of the treatments, he was surrounded by the goodbyes and grief of other people's lives. The woman in the next room also had terminal cancer. Her husband was by her side every single day, watching her fade from a vibrant, beautiful woman into a frail shell. And when she finally passed, the gentle man finally broke down. He saw him collapse over her bed, his large frame completely broken, and he thought to himself, "It's better this way." I couldn't bear the thought of Chloe crying with such heartbreaking sorrow. Later, he overheard the nurses chatting and learned that the devoted husband had remarried very quickly, just a few months after his wife's death. While others judged him, he could hear the sound of a man's desperate, round-the-clock struggle with a grief he couldn't bear alone. Perhaps the pain was too much, and he was just desperate for someone to fill the emptiness of his house. And then he thought, it would be good if Chloe remarried, too. At least someone would be there to keep her company. That's why on the day of Chloe's engagement, he was genuinely happy for her. Shauna sat by his bed, peeling an apple, and casually brought up Chloe. Her fiancé has been in love with her since they were kids. His persistence in chasing her back then was legendary in their circle. For him to finally win her over, you could say it's a blessing. On his phone screen were paparazzi photos from the engagement party. The two of them were pouring a champagne tower, a handsome couple looking perfect together. If someone loves her, that's all that matters. That's wonderful. Shauna shot him a sideways glance, seeing his genuine expression, and a look of irritation crossed her face. Ethan, are you an idiot? He just smiled and held out his hand. Are you going to give me that apple or not? She glared at him and shoved the peeled apple into his hand. He took a bite with a grin, and then she said suddenly, I've contacted a leading specialist overseas for you. Do you want to go abroad for treatment? Shauna looked away and began to ramble. I mean, the medical facilities are better there, and this doctor is one of the best in his field. I just thought if you could go, maybe there's a better chance. Of course, if you're worried about being in an unfamiliar place, I actually have a fellowship opportunity there, so as a friend, I could go with you. Okay. She stopped talking and turned to look at him. He smiled. Thank you, my friend. His dad came with him. He'd initially argued against it, thinking that if he never came back, it would be easier for him to believe he was just living a new life abroad. The stubborn old man wouldn't have it. You think you can handle foreign food? Your stomach is already sick. It needs proper care. He grinned and teased him. I was just trying to spare myself from seeing you cry. He looked out the window and sighed. Your mother will watch over you. Shauna also said, the heavens will look after you. He asked earnestly, but if I'm praying in English, will the Eastern gods understand me? Shauna rolled her eyes at him. Haven't you heard? English is a global language. But it seemed the gods had abandoned him. The surgery failed. In just a few weeks, he became so thin he was unrecognizable, his face pale and drawn. But he still held his pencil, sketching lightly on a pad of paper, drawing Miss Rabbit again. He nodded. Shauna sat on the edge of my bed, resting her chin on her hand as she studied the drawing. Every single one of these looks like Chloe, but why a rabbit? That woman is a wolf, not a rabbit. Have you ever seen her fight? She's vicious. I have. I smiled softly as the memory of the first time I saw her surfaced. I've seen her fight. She's ferocious, but the moment it's over, she's perfectly calm. But I've seen more of the everyday Chloe. The one who eats quietly, who watches people intently, who has a sensitive and fragile heart. She'll snap if you push her too far, but if you just tease her a little, she'll curl up contentedly in your lap, just like a sweet, tame little rabbit. I couldn't help but ask Shauna with a smile, don't you think she's adorable when she's being sweet? Shauna fell silent for a long moment. Maybe you should see her, she finally said. She doesn't have any feelings for that man. The Vanderbilts are just forcing her. I know. Ever since she started buying my paintings under the name M.S. Bloom, I understood. Stars across the land, a spring bloom reborn. Chloe. It was all surprisingly clear. I couldn't eat. I grew weaker and weaker until I couldn't even hold a pencil. Looking at my dad's grim face as he unpacked a container of food by my bed, I spoke to him with a rare seriousness. Dad, when I bought that apartment back home, I put it in your name. The deed is behind Mom's photograph. There's also a bank card there. There isn't a lot of money in it, but it's for you, a little something from me. Please don't be afraid to use it. Every penny in that account is money I earned myself. The money from Chloe, it all went to the treatments. There wasn't much left. And, yes, if you meet a nice woman, you should get married. I've always been okay with that. It's too hard to be alone. He pressed his lips together, saying nothing, just trying to bring the spoon to my mouth. A tear escaped and rolled down my cheek. Dad, I don't want it. Can you just push me outside for some sun? It had been raining for days, a miserable, constant drizzle, but today the sun had finally come out. I closed my eyes, soaking in the sunlight, feeling a deep lethargy, the smell of damp earth and grass filling the air. I thought I heard someone calling my name from far away. I opened my eyes and strained to see. Someone was running toward me, silhouetted against the light. She who was always so pristine was wearing a dress splattered with mud. It was Chloe. Her eyes were wide with a frantic, desperate look as she reached me. Tears streamed down her face, and her hand gripping mine wouldn't stop shaking. She cried, Ethan, you liar. Why did you lie to me? Ethan, please, just lie to me one more time. This tall, powerful woman collapsed at my knees, crying like a child. My thin, bony hand stroked her soft hair, and I smiled, feeling a sense of peace. It's so good to see you, but Chloe, I'm getting a little sleepy. As everything started to fade, the last thing I heard was her heartbroken scream. Please don't. For Chloe, meeting Ethan was fate. She had been fighting with her family and had taken a solo trip to escape, and there, at the foot of the snowy peaks in Denali, She met a young man who was also hiking alone. He wasn't classically handsome, but he had a face you wanted to keep looking at, and she found herself stealing more than one glance until she heard him shout into the vast snowy wilderness, "I'm not ready to give up." Chloe had been about to leave, but hearing that made her smile. When she turned to find him, he was just walking past her. He wore a light, cool, floral scent, like a rare wildflower found high in the mountains. Chloe was captivated and found herself following him. Hello. It was the first time she'd ever hit on a guy, and it was a spectacular failure. The young man just pulled his bandana up over his face and said, "Divorced with a kid." The next time she saw him, the supposedly divorced father was Ethan, singing on a stool in a bar. His voice was unique, like a smooth, sweet liquor, not strong, but all the more intoxicating for it. Chloe rarely had her people look into a man, but the report came back with no mention of a divorce or a child. She didn't approach him again, but she started coming to the bar often just to hear him sing. He was a good singer and handsome, so there were always some idiots who couldn't keep their hands to themselves. So she followed them and taught one of them a lesson. She hadn't gotten into a physical fight in a long time, and she'd had a few drinks, so she might have been a bit rough. It was only when she was done that she remembered he was still standing there. Chloe composed herself and dragged him away. There should have been no rush. She had all the time in the world to get to know this young man, but the Vanderbilts couldn't wait. They had a marriage already arranged for her. The Vanderbilts were happy. Her mother was happy, but she was not. She wanted to choose the man she liked, so she played to what she thought he wanted and simply offered Ethan money. But the boy was bold and intense, and he agreed immediately, which completely threw her off. With one move, she got the man she wanted and defied her family. It was a perfect plan. Chloe was triumphant. She thought she had everything she wanted in the palm of her hand. Everything except for Ethan's heart. She thought they had a lifetime ahead of them and that she had all the time in the world to earn it. But the good times didn't last. The Vanderbilt family's finances collapsed and their already fragile empire fell into ruin. The ironic thing was, the only way to save the family was for her to sacrifice her marriage and her love. Her father pointed a finger in her face and screamed, "Without the Vanderbilt name, you are nothing." Soon after, her own tech company went bankrupt. It wasn't a failed investment. Her own family had sabotaged her from behind to force her hand. Her parents had personally destroyed the company she had built from the ground up. It was just like when she was a child, building a castle with blocks, only for her mother to knock it down and tell her it was punishment for skipping her piano lessons. She didn't care. She could always start over. But then her mother found her weak spot. You can always start another company if this one fails. But what if something were to happen to Ethan? She couldn't risk him. The Vanderbilts were all monsters, and monsters were capable of anything. But Chloe couldn't accept it. She felt there had to be something she could do. 2 days later, Ethan was hit by a delivery scooter and needed 5 stitches in his leg. Chloe knew it was her family's doing. It was a warning and a demand. "Let's get a divorce, okay?" He agreed just as quickly and cleanly as when she had first proposed. Even though she was the one asking for it, Chloe had hoped he would hesitate, that he would look sad, that he would at least ask why, instead of being so completely unfazed. Sometimes, she wanted to tear that handsome face apart just to see if there was anything underneath besides a love of money, to see if he liked her even a little bit. On the day of her engagement party, she knew he would see the news online. That night, she drove to his apartment and stared at his dark window all night long. The next day, at a luncheon, a friend let something slip after a few drinks. She said that Ethan had gotten together with Shauna Kelly right after the divorce. "I'm telling you, in our circle, you have to marry your own kind. Those low-class men only care about money." Chloe let out a cold laugh, smashed her wine glass, and lunged at the woman, beating her soundly. By the time the others pulled them apart, the woman was still muttering indignantly, "What did I say that was wrong? I saw him getting into her car with my own 2 eyes." Chloe stormed out, calling Shauna as she walked to the parking garage. "Are you in love with Ethan?" Shauna was silent on the other end for a moment before saying, "I'm leaving for a fellowship abroad in a few days. He's coming with me." Chloe threw her phone, kicked her car door, and wanted to smash the entire world to pieces. But who did she have the right to blame? Shauna? Ethan? Or herself? More days passed, and the young man was gone from her world. At first, she would linger outside his building, sometimes for the entire night, just hoping to see a light turn on in his window. But night after night passed, and she finally had to accept it. Her boy was gone. He had left with Shauna. Chloe thought about how she'd spent her whole life as a rebel, always fighting the Vanderbilts, only to end up as their obedient little puppet. Whatever she thought, let it be. But 6 months later, she got an overseas call from Shauna. "Ethan is sick. You should come see him." What kind of sickness would make her use that tone of voice? "Chloe, you should probably hurry. He's fading fast. Very fast." Chloe dropped everything, wanting only to get to her boy as fast as she could. But she was still too late. The beautiful, rare wildflower she remembered had withered into a gaunt figure under the sun. 2 weeks later, a crash on the Golden Gate Bridge. The Vanderbilt heiress, Chloe, was driving drunk and plunged with her car into the bay. No one knew it was the anniversary of the day she and I first met. She was simply on her way to see the boy she once loved.